Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World episode 167. I'm your host John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. And in fact, today's episode came about because of something I wrote in one of my Substacks. So I wrote, "Are guilds still a thing?" And Leah Callan Butler, who is a board member at the Blockchain Game Alliance, also runs the Emphasis agency. She wrote back and said, yes, of course they are, which I sort of knew, of course. So Leah works with YGG, Yield Guild Games, and I've had Gabby on the podcast many times before. So she arranged for me to talk to Gabby, and they just put out a document called Guilds as a Protocol. And also, as an added extra, we got Khai Wei, who is one of the partners at LongHash Ventures. And LongHash has just announced a strategic investment into YGG. So the whole thing came together quite nicely. So we have Gabby talking about sort of the whole sort of vision for guilds. Obviously, he really sort of kickstarted the whole thing back in 2021 with scholarship models and Axie Infinity. But it's moved on a lot since then. And so we get into some of the details about why guilds might be useful for the future. And obviously, Khai talking about the investment sort of thesis around that. So I hope you enjoy the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel every week, putting out new episodes of everything that's going on in blockchain gaming. So I hope you enjoy that. Don't miss out, and I'll see you next time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Very pleased today. I have Gabby from YGG. How's it going, Gabby?
Hey, John. It's been a while. Good to see you again.
Yes, we were talking about that. So 2.5 years since Gabby was last on. Actually, I think it's your fourth time on the show. So you may be.
It is.
You may be the most
number one in the leaderboard.
Number one in the leaderboard, despite the massive gap. But so great to have you back on, and we also have Khai from LongHash. How's it going?
Great to be here, John. Thanks for the invite, and of course, always glad to be alongside Gabby.
Good. So, as I'll sort of assume people have an awareness of Gabby as one of the co-founders of YGG. We're going to get into that a little bit. So, I thought we'd start off with Khai is going to tell us a bit about himself, how he got into blockchain, and a little about LongHash Ventures.
For sure. Just to keep it short, we started in 2017 investing into the space. We started as an accelerator, and now we run two funds. We specialize in bootstrapping ecosystems. Over the years, our thesis has been adapting based on what we feel that the space really needs to push forward, right? So we started with the application wave, and then looking at DeFi summer, and then throughout the bear market, we looked at a lot of infra that needed to adapt, right, to scale, to improve user experience. And now, I think in the last year and up until this point, the focus has now shifted back to consumer and user adoption and what is going to bring forth the next wave. And of course, that's why we're here to discuss games and guilds.
Yeah, good. And you've written a sort of a fairly recent sort of thesis about why you invested in YGG, which is obviously why you're on the show. And I noticed on that there was a picture that I remember when Gabby first tweeted it out, whatever, 3 years ago, where Gabby's actually in the pitching for the accelerator. So
that's right. That was 2018.
comes full circle. Yeah. So
first pitch day.
Yeah. Oh, was it the first one? Oh, cool. So do you want to take us through that? So you've recently done a strategic investment into YGG. As you say, you now think sort of consumer adoption is sort of where it's at. So can you talk a little bit more specifically about guilds within that sort of framework and why you think those are going to be a useful sort of primitive, and why you think as an investor you presumably think they're going to 10x, 100x, whatever your metric for growth is.
Yeah, for sure. So when we start to move from infrastructure back to consumer adoption, one of the first questions is, where are the users going to come from, and what are they going to do on chain, right? What's going to bring them into the ecosystem? And if we look at the breakout applications over the last 1 year or so, I think it's very clearly, between gaming and social. I think we had some waves of those two. Now, as an investor, how do you invest in this trend if you believe that these two verticals will bring on board a lot of users, right? Sure, you can go to, specific game studios and titles, you can go to various social apps, But it's actually much harder to invest in those if you are not deep in the weeds. And although, of course, I myself am a hardcore gamer, be it from casual all the way to like PC and console, it is still, very difficult for us to pick out those individual titles. While we have some very high conviction bets there, it is much easier to actually work with a player that is almost like the social layer, almost like the index of the entire vertical of, I think, gaming, social, and actually incoming also deep in. When we started looking into YGG, we realized that, hey, we're not just talking about a gaming guild, we're talking about the social layer for consumer crypto, right? And YGG has been one of the few players that has persisted through the bear market and continue to nurture community, build out, Gap, super quests, integrate directly into games, platforms, and that has laid a very strong foundation to capture this explosive growth, which we predict will come this year.
Okay, good, excellent. So covers a bunch of stuff we can talk about. So, Gabby, last time you were on, it was just sort of when Axie was sort of peaking and guilds were the hot thing, and obviously you guys were sort of very much in the vanguard of that. And I mean, maybe a softball question, but how much of that thesis 2.5 years on is still there, and how much has it had to evolve over what we've seen in the last 2.5 years, which was Axie Infinity, massive big hit, really big for a certain number of guilds rode that well in terms of onboarding and getting activity into the game, and also from an investment point of view, launching tokens. There's a few who did that, but that was a very narrow actually window, and then since then, really until sort of this end of last year, there's not really been a game at that sort of level. But anyway, go back to the original question: how much of the thesis that you thought of then is just like, yeah, we were exactly right, and how much is sort of evolved?
Yeah, if you go back to the original thesis, we wanted to aggregate communities to be able to play together and have ownerships in these crypto networks, right? If you look at a lot of these games that have ownership represented in either tokens or NFTs, the idea is that you could bootstrap and grow these networks via tokens. And what we do, aggregating people, helping them play together, helping them to own these, has still very much remained the same. What's changed over time is how this is expressed, and also with the manner that these games have changed, right? I think one of the things that the market has missed, especially in the last 2 years, was that they conflated the guild model with the scholarship model, which is very popular and explosive back then. And all of the, I would say, copycats, the Axie model also had copied a scholarship model, meaning that there were NFTs that people would use that could earn in-game tokens that would then be used for yield, right? And when the market fell, that yield came along with it. But even in 2021, we were actually moving into the next phase of our vision then. We released the first Soulbound token for YGG in July of 2021, actually even before we released the YGG token. And we had started working on our questing system, the Guild Advancement Program then. The idea was that you wanted people to build reputation by doing things in different games, in different crypto networks. And that reputation could be represented in non-tradable soulbound tokens, so that as someone contributes to a network, whether you're doing it in a game, in a DAO, in a guild like YGG, people could note what your contributions are and your value to the network, and you would be able to get opportunities accordingly, whether it's early access to a game, or being able to earn higher, or maybe a game offering you more rewards because you're a top player in a certain genre, right?
Okay. That's sort of moving toward. I mean, I don't know how much of this is sort of just sort of framing in terms of words. You've more recently been talking about sort of guild as a protocol. So obviously that's sort of what you've been saying is sort of part of that. Protocol is a bit of a term that can, I guess, mean lots of different things. So what exactly do you mean by guild as a protocol, and what's the sort of, where does that end up? Because I think there's one way I think it would end up, but I'd like to hear sort of where you think it sort of ends up.
Yeah, so a guild protocol specifically for what we're doing is that we're aggregating people, players, and putting their group identity on chain, allowing them to have group treasury, group reputation, and allowing them to do actions or go on quests together as a group, and then be recognized or get rewards from a group level. So if you think about like having a World of Warcraft guild and then putting that structure on chain, that is where we're headed with everything that we're building for the last few years.
And more generally in the market, when we've seen, I guess over the last sort of year or 6 months to a year, on the infrastructure side, we've seen a lot of basically everyone launching their own blockchain. So when I hear YGG's Guild as a protocol, I go, well, when's the YGG L3 going to turn up? I mean, because sort of that's where at the moment that's every blockchain project sort of ends up with a token, and at the moment everyone ends up with their own chain. So is that way? Do you need to do that, or is there something more subtle that you can do?
Honestly, I think it's really stupid that everyone looking to pivot has their own L2 or LG. Everyone is trying to sell their own block space. We're not selling any block space. We're actually looking to fill up people's block space with people and with actions going on chain. So no, we're not making our own game, and no, we don't have our own blockchain. What we do is we bring the human layer, the social, the group layer on chain. We get people to form groups together and then do actions together, play games together on chain.
Okay, cool. And I guess as one sort of anchor point of this is the YGG token fairly recently went live on the Ronin blockchain, which is obviously where you have historic links to Sky Mobius with Actifinity, and at the moment the Ronin blockchain is sort of where the one big game, Pixels, is actually operating. I guess we'll talk a little bit about sort of how you've operated with that as well. So going back to sort of the investor point of view, I guess sort of one of the key things investors always talk about, or whether they mean it, is sort of scale. Everyone sort of like scale, and obviously YGG. I mean, I don't know how many sort of members you have, but you're fairly sort of sizable. But I sort of wonder, do you see a world where, because you're sort of saying you can invest in games, but that's sort of a little bit hit and miss. So maybe sort of something like a guild or YGG gives you sort of broader access to a sector. Maybe you could think of it as an ETF. Maybe that's a bad analogy, but sort of something like that gives you broad access. But then you have to assume from an investor point of view that this guild the value in it is going to grow 10x or 100x. And obviously that doesn't have to be the number of people in the guild, but obviously that would sort of be a measure of that. So what sort of, for now, an investor who's sort of interested in how it grows, what sort of metrics do you look at to see how sort of success happens for a guild, in this case YGG, over the next year or so?
For sure. Yeah. So I think first I'll talk about the positioning and how that sets us up to scale, and then perhaps try to paint like a very longer term, like a TAM vision of where we might be headed, right? Yeah. So the first thing on the positioning, it is very difficult if you are trying to form your own social group. Right? I think the traditional concept of like, hey, I bring all these friends together and we play games together inside our own little community. It's very hard to scale that social connection, right? Just because of things like Dunbar's number, needing to have these like relationships with everybody you bring on. And that's why I think every single guild is trying to figure out how do we move down the stack or expand the scope, right? And of course, many of them have transition to become their L2s, L3s. I think where YGG is going is really interesting with the guild protocol, right? So if you have been following some of the messages, it's not a guild, it's the guild of guilds, right? So we want to onboard each regional localized community to come and build on the YGG guild protocol. And I think that firstly already unlocks the scale potential. And secondly, this interesting strategic choice to not have our own chain here also keeps us agnostic to all of the games and to all of the chains, right? So I think if the moment you launch your own chain, sure, like there's a repricing or a markup in terms of evaluation, but also the trade-off there is that you're kind of locking in your own ecosystem, right? You're almost like, hey, this is the first-class citizen, the games and the apps that are going to be on my chain, and everything else is like maybe a strategic relationship, but you're not as involved, and your token will likely need to live on your chain as well. Well, as we see with YGG, right? Sure, we can be on Ethereum, and then we have very good relationship with Ronin, and we can be on Ronin too. And if there is a good chain that comes on, then we can go ahead and expand there, and we can channel our community there. If there's a good game, whatever it is, we can go there as well, and we can activate the local communities, be it like the more hardcore players, let's say in the very competitive games, or the more kind of like mass adoption, kind of retail audience for a more casual game, right? We can form these, I guess, like localized or specialized guilds for those games and for those regions. And so I think that itself already sets us up to scale to, across the entire ecosystem and also expand into Web 2 as well. And so where is the scale for that, right? If you think of like one blockchain and maybe as you have L2s, L3s, maybe you're thinking of, hundred thousands, millions of users. But if you can think about a social layer that spans across all of the chains and all of the games, right? That's when I can start to imagine tens of millions, 100 millions, maybe even like a billion users, because you're not constrained by things like block space and what kind of applications are on there.
To add to what Shika said, it's always been one of our principles that we want to bring players to where the best games are, no matter what chain. So yeah, we've been on Ronin for a long time. There are games on base Parallel, for example, something that we've supported heavily. We're starting to work with some games over in Immutable, like Guild of Guardians. So we have the ability to match players' interests with the games that interest them, and then create the incentive structure for groups to come together, do quests there, like do tournaments, and just play with the games that they like.
Yeah, and if you look at the games that YGG is involved in, they are specific I guess, like guilds or groups, I don't know how you call it, Gabby, now, that are formed just for those games, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of guilds, for example, that are very active in Pixels, which we've been working with very closely. We have the #1 guild in Axie with YGG Esports, and YGG Esports also very active in Parallel. So there is definitely a matching between what players like and what games they're playing.
That makes sense. And so sort of going back a bit to the sort of expansion idea, I guess this is one for Gabby. I mean, when you first started out, had this very sort of strong concept of sort of regional subDAOs. So you had sort of one in India. I mean, you got Korea, Japan, big one in Latin America, and that seemed to me one part of the thesis that didn't probably quite pan out, in the sense that the Indian one has sort of bought itself out and split off and is sort of doing something. I would say, I mean, it's not totally different to YGG, but it's very different positioning and sort of taking on its own model. And so I wonder, were the subDAO something that didn't really work out, you think, because that was just sort of the evolution of the space, or is that something you think does now fit into this sort of protocol model maybe better than it did originally?
When we did the subDAO model, rather than create basically like country versions of YGG, like have a country head for India and for LATAM, or regional head, we thought that we would invest in founders that were kind of local to the ground, and then figure out what the best way to evolve the YGG model was. And that turned out to be a good approach, because the bear market was really hard, and then everyone had to find a way to survive, honestly, and to kind of evolve the model to what they had, right? So yeah, like YGG Southeast Asia has now evolved to WeGG. IndieGG is now KGen. Ola GG is still very strong, with a very strong like esports focus in LATAM. And yeah, so it was us saying that we didn't really know what the best way to approach those markets were, and investing in the strong local founders with kind of high alignment to YGG's mission was the best way for us to do it. So I do think it's still very early innings. They're still around. They're still bringing players to these games with maybe like different kind of focus in what games or how they're going to market or how they're reaching local communities. I think the thesis still stands strong, although of course we've really yet to see what they can do at scale.
Yeah. And I guess that sort of plays also into something where, I guess obviously you're from the Philippines. The Axie thing, partly because of you, and the YGG was very, very strong in the Philippines. Obviously, there's reasons cultural in the Philippines as well that sort of chimed. But sort of YGG, although I imagine it has people, members globally, is still very strong in that Southeast Asian market. Whereas this, and maybe this is a wider thing about views on Web3 gaming, we've not seen like North America. Not seen very much. Western Europe, not seen very much. Even Eastern Europe, not very much. So is that just do you think YGG over the 10 years sort of expands and becomes a global thing, or do you think it ends up with these very different regional sort of, and maybe they don't even call themselves, maybe guilds is the wrong term. How do you see that playing out?
So I absolutely have like massive confidence in the growth of not only guilds but Web3 gaming as well. I think the what I tend to look at is how free to play grew first in Asia as well, right? The model was invented in Korea, and then it kind of extended to Southeast Asia first, and then it didn't really catch on in the West until you started seeing on the PC side League of Legends, and then on the mobile side I would say like more like Western native free to play titles like Clash of Clans and Candy Crush. And I think the same thing is going to happen. Some of the best free-to-play games right now are being created in places like South Korea and Vietnam, though we do have very strong game developers from the West as well, right? Like some of them, like Gabe Ladon has been one of the pioneers of free-to-play. Some of them are coming into like I would say more crypto-native backgrounds like Luke of Pixels. So I do think that it will catch on maybe later in the West, because I think that Western gamers are more resistant to changes in business models, and they want to see a kind of game that is attuned for Western markets succeed first before accepting it. But I do think that apart from Southeast Asia, it'll grow in the rest of Asia in the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I wonder. I mean, again, it's sort of interesting that sort of what you're doing now with your sort of campaigns, and I mean, broadly what you're doing with all guilds do, but YGG, you're onboarding people to games, they're going through tutorials, they're sort of earning off-chain stuff in the system, they're earning on-chain stuff, Soulbound, there's a whole bunch of stuff they're doing there. And I guess we're also seeing, in particular at the moment, I think because of crypto sort of sentiment and tokens launching stuff, we're also seeing other organisations coming into a similar sort of engagement model, but not from a guild background. So some of them are guilds that have sort of been pivoting and rethinking what they're doing, and some of them are like Forge, which is just like a web-based thing where you plug games in, and again like Mockaverse, which is sort of a similar sort of thing, but it's equally not a guild in that same way, and stuff like Mon Protocol, which is coming from a game developer and building its own thing. I mean, do all these things, are they competing? Is there a model that wins out? Do they all sort of win out? Because if I was just like someone who was just like, I'm interested in blockchain games now, and there's sort of all these different places I can sort of log into to social farm or press a button and do things, and I sort of get the same rewards. It sort of seems at the moment, but it's not very clear. I don't know, maybe with an investment hat on. Do you think that Shika? Do you think the guild model is more engaging for that, or because everyone's sort of building this sort of social sort of ID reputation layer? I mean, a lot of people say they're doing that. I mean, I'm sure not all of them will manage it. But yes,
for sure. I know Gabby has a lot of thoughts here, but
Gabby can come in after you. But
yeah. So I'll start off. Firstly, yes, indeed, we have been seeing more and more people trying to tackle the problem of distribution, right? And many people are thinking of various approaches, right? Be it from an SPT angle, points angle, launcher, aggregator. There are many kind of like ways to spin it, right? And so, firstly, that's great validation that this problem space is a huge pain point, and we definitely need people to come and address it. I think what YG has done, and just from the culture that Gabby has set, is one that's really inclusive and welcoming and generous. Right? I see that sometimes certain founders can be quite competitive, and they'd be like, no, we're the best, right? And like everyone else is nothing. But from what I can see with YG and Gabby, it's like, hey, let's work together, right? And let's find a way to like all grow the pie in the space. And I think Web3 has a certain culture of this composability and openness, right? And it is the players who build the strongest goodwill, reputation, branding that will succeed in the space. And also, there's a certain kind of Lindy effect or a certain patina to founders who have persisted through the cycles, right? Whereas like, hey, there's this new distribution platform, you can farm these many points, get this many airdrops. How do you know how sustainable that is? How do you know what the motives of these founders are, right? Whereas you can see that YG has persisted, has been working alongside, the games, the communities, and will continue to build throughout the years, right? So there's a certain kind of comfort and stability there, and also accumulating the brand reputation and the players over the years. There's a certain network effect that is forming, right? It's almost like, hey, if I'm gonna listen to music, I want to listen on Spotify because I keep accumulating my data there,
Yeah.
right? And so that if any new artists and so on, I want to like play it there. Or if I have a certain playlist that I bookmarked on a certain browser or on like certain phones, maybe I want to recreate that playlist on Spotify just so that I have it here, and like when I want to access it, I can do so. So I think that the kind of interoperability that's on chain, which is by nature already transparent, is also going to accumulate in a more open and neutral guild protocol. And so I'm not concerned. I think we all want to work together, and I'm glad there are so many people working together.
Okay.
Warning, I can talk about this all day. So first of all, I'm an investor in Forge, in Mochaverse, and Mon Protocol, and actually a few others like that. So I do have a lot of thoughts on these. And one of the, I would say, like core principles that I've been tracking is that quests are the Web3 native ad networks. That's like very kind of basic thesis, which you can see not just in YGG, not just in these three protocols that you mentioned, but a lot of other kind of engagement networks as well, right? If you think about like what the core Web2 ads are, you have the display ad, you have the Facebook install ad or a search ad. Is basically like have a blurb or an image and then click something and then get to install. In crypto, the native ad unit is you do something and you get a reward, or like you do X, get Y. And so that means that everyone has to do some kind of engagement network to actually get distribution. Now there's going to be really different ways where a lot of these networks will do distribution. For example, of course, YGG wants to aggregate groups and then bring them to games together and then specialize in, I would say, like different types of work or tasks and then note that into reputation. Someone like Forge is trying to aggregate, for example, what your Web2 gamer data looks like, and then try to match that with Web3 games. And so there's this different approach, and the beauty of what all of these does in aggregate, and what Shika was saying, is the interoperability. And this is why we're a big believer of Soulbound tokens.
Okay.
With Soulbound tokens, it's like we think of Soulbound tokens as the Web3 cookies. It's players putting their things that they've done on chain, on wallet that they own, and showing what reputation they want to show. And it's not just your reputation with YGG that matters. You can take a look at the reputation that you've done in different games. You can take a look at reputation in DAOs, in different protocols. And that gives a very good kind of overview of what kind of player you are in the Web3 space. And that also gives other protocols, whether it's games or others, like kind of a picture of who you are. Do we want to acquire you as a user, and what do we want to offer you to go into our protocol? So I think this is where the space is really heading. Reputation starts to matter more, especially you've seen different types of airdrop campaigns with kind of different quality, different success rate, and what's been lacking is really reputation. Now you can see airdrops that are being targeted towards certain communities. I think you'll be seeing them targeted towards more specific actions, more specific like reputation, Soulbound tokens in different DAOs and guilds.
Yeah. If I may just expand on that a little bit more. This topic is going to be never ending. But I really want to bring in the idea of decentralized society, right? And Vitalik has written about this. I feel that there is such a clear cry for help in the industry right now for reputation and for decentralized society. I think so far what we had is some form of pseudonymous, privacy-ish, and basically that comes with the permissionless nature. But that also invites a lot of, short-termism, like rugs and Sybil attacks, and it makes the space almost like hostile, right? And it's very difficult to play long-term games with long-term people in crypto if you only have what we have right now on chain, right? You have to form almost like the offline relationships and the Telegram groups, and that's why we go to so many conferences and like meet people over the years, because we kind of need to figure out that social reputation in order to have those long-lasting relationships on chain. Now, if we start to bring a lot of those reputation points, the engagement networks, the cookies on chain, now I can start to build this web of trust. Not even without meeting you in person. I know, hey, you've been through this like number of years, interacted with these protocols, interacted with these people, spent this amount to purchase this kind of asset, right? And that helps me build up their relationship, and also gives people something to lose, right? Like, hey, if I do a rug right now, or if I like just pump and dump something, I risk losing all of this reputation that built up over the years, right? And so we're really pushing the balance of all of crypto towards long-term and cooperative mindset.
Good. Yeah, I just point out for people who do, I should have done this earlier, but a Soulbound token is something that you can't sell. You can't. It's basically locked into a wallet. So the point is, it's a and that's why it works really well for reputation, because you basically can't get rid of it. Or you'd have to start a whole new wallet. So you sort of like you have to burn your entire reputation if there was something in there that for some reason you didn't want. But it's I don't know whether people would like Soulbound tokens as cookies. I wonder whether the Web3 people think we want to get rid of cookies. We don't want this, but I guess that's somewhat different in the sense you can be rewarded.
If the cookies are user owned and you can choose what you share, I think it's going to be different, right?
But then doesn't that, with my VC hat on, I sort of go, well, so YGG is an ad network pretending to be a guild, so maybe we should get rid of some of the guild stuff and just become we're just a social ad network. Maybe that's beyond games. I mean, that's a bigger. If you could create
So there's something that you touch upon there, like an ad network pretending to be a guild. I think actually I would like to think of ourselves as a very human-centric ad network. Someone that actually values the individuals and cares about them, not as a faceless daily active user, but someone who has a reputation, who's part of a group, who likes something, who has certain skills. I think that's what the future of ad networks should be. It's like valuing people for who they are and what they've done.
Mm-hmm. So maybe the term ad network is the incorrect one, and all ad networks will want to become guilds, because guilds are the self-owned, decentralized ad network.
The problem with Web 2 in particular is that they've really reduced humans to like faceless metrics, right? Like if you're thinking about Facebook or Google, you're only thinking about cohorts or even whole countries as an aggregate. And a person is basically reduced to like, what's your retention, what's your LTV, what's your CAC. And in Web3, what we'd like to do is kind of bring back some of that face by what have you done, what have you accomplished, what skills do you have, and then matching that to your interests. So the value exchange is still the same business model as an ad network. You're matching, an ad network basically is a matching by someone who wants to do something and someone who wants to pay for it. And that's the guild's business model as well. But now we're grouping people into interest, into skills, into reputation sets, and then bringing that into places where they can use that and where people are willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Good. So, final thing I sort of wanted to touch on today is we sort of mentioned it in passing a few times, is Pixels. So I guess so. Pixels is the by far and away, just ran the data yesterday, is by far and away the biggest sort of blockchain game in terms of sort of on-chain activity. Obviously, a bunch of bots in there as there are with all games. But I put out a funny graph, which is basically every other game is under 100,000 daily active unique wallets, and Pixels is now heading to 900,000. So if you added all the other ones together, they'd still be less than Pixels. I think when people, a bit like Axie actually back in the day, when people outside the industry sort of looked at Axie, they were just like, it's not a very good game, or sort of. And I think people would look at Pixels and go, graphically, it's like a little pixelated sort of social RPG where you're farming, and maybe people who went in and started to play it would just go, this is not very engaging, and maybe miss the point a little bit. But so that's been a massive success story. Partly that's because it launched on Ronin, and partly because people like YGG and Mockaverse, some of these sort of new emerging communities have got involved. But do you want to tell us a little bit about how YGG got involved in that? And I guess that is from looking at what happened with Axie, that was a very brief sort of spurt and died down again. I guess with Pixels, we're seeing for the first time a sort of a sustainable model of how a game and a guild would work in synergenic sort of form.
Yeah, so we started engaging with Pixels when they were still on Polygon Network. And the way we identify them is because our players constantly mention Pixels as a game that they want to put in our guild advancement program. So we work with them, and then we brought some quests over for 2 seasons of guild advancement program. So our guilds were already active in Pixels around maybe 6 to 8 months before the move to Ronin. So when the move to Ronin happened, the guilds that were working with us had a good advantage because they were already familiar with the game. They had some built-in reputation and assets in the game, and that enabled them to kind of really speed up the process once it was on Ronin, where a lot of our communities already had Ronin wallets. And once Pixels got on Ronin, as you could see, the usage really lined up, and I think there's a high kind of fit between the type of gameplay of Pixels and the community base of Ronin. And coming from Axie, a lot of them emerging markets. Number one, the game is highly accessible and easy to play. You don't need any complicated tutorials to really get started with the game. Second is that you don't even need to have an app download. You can play it from a mobile browser. So very accessible, very easy to get started. And it's also a very social game, right? Pixels recently released their guilds, and YGG itself is featured as part of the guild hall, teaching people to join Pixels guild. So we really collaborated with them to teach people the value of guilds within Pixels. And I think it will be probably one of the leading, but not the only, game that's leading like Web3 adoption in this cycle.
And I guess it's interesting.
If I may add a little bit to that, I think there's more to the secret of success of Pixels as well, right? I think they are one of the most, I guess, crypto native and also actively composable games out there. They actively integrated dozens of PFPs, be it on Ronin, outside Ronin, right? Other games like Treeverse and so on, PFPs like CyberKongs, which then came over, or other games on Ronin. Like Hydro, of course, Mochaverse is there as well, and you can use meme tokens like Pepe to go and buy stuff in game. And when other games launch on Ronin, they have these little side quests. So Mochaverse had their own little side quest. CyberKongs had their own like map, even, right? So this kind of actively embracing the ecosystem of Web3, and not just like, hey, I'm building my own little game on my own little island. Everybody come and play my thing. It almost makes Pixel feel like the hangout space of all the other games in crypto, right? And I think we're almost missing that kind of casual MMO hangout space right now. And it almost feels like Pixels might start to become that, right? It almost feels like it's more than a farming simulator and like a pixelated casual game now.
Yeah, no, I definitely think what I was trying to say, my little introduction there was what you sort of see on the box is not why people are playing it. They're not, that gameplay is not compelling enough for people to stay in there. But as you pointed out, there's various other reasons why it is the place that people have ended up. And obviously, I've had Luke on the podcast, and he's obviously extremely impressive, and the team is extremely impressive to be doing what they're doing, and they just come at it from a very different, as you say, Shihai, very different angle in terms of. And I remember that back when they first sort of launched the project, it was very much about bring all your other sort of PFPs into our game. They were very sort of meta on that. And I wonder as well, it's not play to earn in that formal sense like Axie was. I mean, there's obviously a token that you can get at, but they've obviously learned about how to deal with the economics, which obviously allows them to be sustainable. And I'm sure people can make money off the game, but people are not going in there to make money in the way that we had with Axie. So we're seeing the industry has learned some pretty significant lessons from there. And more generally, you mentioned a few other games. So there's nothing on the moment on chain that's as big as Pixels. You mentioned Parallel trading card game, and there's a few sort of lots of things coming down the line. But have you sort of been surprised in the 2.5 years sort of since we last spoke that for a guild structure to work, you do need some big games, and obviously you can help some games become big, but you do need that sort of underlying. You do need good content, and we really haven't sort of seen anything. I mean, maybe there's been a few games that I've liked to play, but there's nothing that's really caught the imagination. Has that been a surprise that it's sort of taking us that long to get these products that are a good enough foundation to sort of have 1 million users?
Well, John, you know that I come from like almost 2 decades of game development.
Yeah.
So we know how hard it is to actually make a good quality game. So if you think about Axie becoming popular in 2021 and then this spurring a lot of game developers to take a serious look at Web3 for the first time and then doing the first few attempts at making, I would say, the next generation of Web3 games. And a good game can make maybe 2 to 3 years to make. And here we are in 2024. And there's a lot of promising games, but there is no game that has really scaled yet to where maybe the largest Web2 counterparts are. So I'm not surprised at all. But what we've been building is towards this eventual future that we know that's coming, where there's going to be Web3 games that will have tens of millions of monthly, even daily users. So we have no doubt it's going to happen, and we're just kind of building towards the future that we're expecting to see.
And do you think those games, like we mentioned with Pixels, have to be sort of crypto native games? They have to have that sort of flexibility and be a little less worried about the AAA quality or the game side of it, and be for these games to be big, we have to be open to some of the crypto sort of stuff. Because at the moment I see a lot of games coming down the line which maybe we impolitely call them Web 2.5 games, and they look better as games. You know, they look 3D, they're using Unreal, but you sort of wonder, is there enough sort of Web 3 in there for it to sort of, you know, work as in the way that we, I guess, see the sector developing?
Yeah, for this, I go back towards, I would say, like the innovation around mobile games and how free-to-play games happened. When mobile games started, all of the games were pay-to-play, so you had to download either 99 cents, $9.99, $99.99, and then free games started happening, and you had very simple games. And then you had free games that had in-app purchases, which is where free-to-play really scaled. But the ones that did so, whether it's Clash of Clans, they did so because they really innovated with what was native, what was new to the business model. And I think it's the same with Web3. Like, you have to embrace like why Web3 matters. You cannot just hide blockchain, because if you hide blockchain, people will end up not caring at all. And what does it mean when you're crypto native? One is that you're very kind of community driven from the ground up. You care about these assets. You let people trade these assets and really have people, like, it doesn't need to be around trading tokens specifically, but it's having people care about assets and build community around these assets that are part of the network of this game.
I think that being said, we still need to make it really easy to use. Right? You don't want to hide the elements, but to make it really easy. So the value proposition is clear. And, you know, over the last couple of years, I think what you mentioned as well on like why they haven't gotten as many users as we expected, partly is because of user experience as well, right? We needed that infrastructure wave to figure out, you know, scaling, account extraction, and now we're starting to see a lot more games adopt those right out of the box.
Lovely. Well, on that note, so thank you very much to Gabby and Shikai for your time and expertise.
Thanks a lot, John. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Good.
Thanks, Gabby. Always really fun.
I think it is interesting how guilds just cut, you know, because as you sort of pointed out in your original thesis, you know, guilds just cut across the industry in lots of different ways. And as you know, I can see, you know, maybe guilds is the term that we end up not using anymore, although you're called YGG, so you got guild baked into your title. So, but it is sort of interesting. You can imagine guilds becoming more specialised in certain things. I guess
Absolutely.
That's how the model works.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think guilds will be called just groups in the future.
Okay.
There are groups that are playing games. There are groups that are doing different things in crypto and getting paid in crypto. This is actually where YGG is headed in a larger sense, but maybe that's for next podcast.
Yes, next podcast. always good to leave the audience wanting more. So thanks to the guys, and thanks to you for watching, listening to the podcast, wherever you are consuming it. Every week we're putting out new episodes. There's so much going on in blockchain that just not having any problems filling the episodes, and there's really fantastic, interesting stuff. So I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.